We're going to start, and we started 2 weeks ago. We asked the question, is Jesus a Democrat, Independent, or Republican? I told you I'd give you the answer. The answer is yes. We went back, we looked at Galatians 2:20, John 14:23, and Romans 8:10. Basically, the idea behind that was, and obviously that's a just a reminder that when you walk into a voting booth and you are a follower of Christ because he lives in you, you basically cast a vote for Jesus in some way or the other. And of course, we live in a world that is crazy politically, and it's certainly divided, and it's insane. If you watch TV, if you like politics, it's a sport, but sometimes it seems like a blood sport. And that certainly is going on today, but we talked about that a little bit. And then we spent some time talking about the power of your vote, how important it is, what it means, what you do. I shared with you what is my political agenda. And I said that everybody has one, or you should if you're a follower. I think it's okay to have one. And my agenda was this, and this is kind of where we've kind of built what we're talking about. But my political agenda is a country that starts with the idea that a country that doesn't believe in its founding ideals can't prosper and survive. Okay? And so building on that, so I want America's current and future leaders to embrace and live up to America's core principles that are rooted in Judeo-Christian foundations as written by the Founding Fathers, set forth in the Constitution. That's what I'm looking for. I want the public leaders to be held accountable for doing so. And I want those who follow God to bring their politics under the lordship of Christ. That's me, that's you. That's my agenda. Doesn't have anything to do with party platforms or anything like that, but it has everything to do with that if you do those things. And so I share with you that and everybody has an agenda. They do. And it's not wrong if you're a follower and you say, well, I have no political agenda. Yeah, you do. You do, right? I mean, you want to dent the universe. You want to touch and change the world with the love of Christ. You want the world to be a better place. So the answer to the question is, yes, Jesus is all of those things because his people, his followers, vote that way. Now, if you're sitting out there and you are a staunch Democrat and you're thinking, man, I don't know how somebody who loves Jesus could vote Republican. Or you might be an independent saying, I don't know. How in the world anybody could vote Republican or Democrat? They're so messed up. Or you might be a Republican and you're sitting there going, how could you ever vote Democrat or independent if you love Jesus? I mean, again, but believe it or not, you're all here and you're members of the church and you're members of the kingdom of God. And that is just the variety and the ilk that we are. I shared with you that I had my eyes open when I wrote my last Disney novel because it turned into because it's a political novel in some ways, and how everyone read into the lead characters or the characters what they wanted to see. And you should see some of the crazy mail that I got and some of the things that people said in reviews and some of the ways it reacted to a character that I wrote because I thought it was a great gimmick. I called my fictional president, and this, by the way, this is who I'm voting for this year. Tyler Pride is his name. He's a fictional president. He's not really real. And I thought the gimmick was, his catchphrase was, it's time to put pride in America again. And I thought that was a very trendy thing to do. And I created a character that was larger than life, and I gave him a whole backstory. And people decided that meant something about me as an author. And they felt licensed because they bought the book to give me their opinions on whatever their political ilk was, which is wildly entertaining to me because I don't care.
Give me your money.
Yeah, I mean, you bought the book. Okay. John 8:32 is where we started. Jesus made the statement, you know the truth will set you free. I suggested to you that the opposite of that is also true. If you don't know the truth, then you will remain in bondage. And then we went on this very happy, upbeat conversation about Nazi Germany and what that looked like. And we talked about a variety of things having to do with Nazi Germany and the rise of Hitler. I shared with you that history is always written by the one with the sharpest axe. History is recorded by the winners. Very rarely is history recorded by the losers. Yet we live in a day and age where we have the luxury of being able to go back and find, at least in more recent times, original documents and some more first-person accounts and some things like that. And so understanding the past is more important than understanding history, because there's a difference. Sometimes we interchange the words, but the past becomes important. And knowing our past and knowing what that means has value. We live in a day and age where you hear the phrase cancel culture a lot, and cancel culture would tend to want to lend itself to rewriting or undoing our past. And as a result, we lose some of our history. You can lose all the history you want, it doesn't undo the past. And as long as there are people who are remembering and recording the stories, the past will be there. So it's kind of like chasing windmills, if you're a literature fan. But that is the move. That is a movement that's very popular today, and I think it's a dangerous one. I mean, for me as a follower, even as I look back on the past of Christianity, boy, Christianity has a wonderful, rich, deep history. But but I tell you what, though, you look at the people of God and how they operated through times, you just shake your head and go, wow. But again, that's part of who we are. That's part of where we've come from. And so I think that's important. And so we talk about the past, but also remember that sometimes history is edited. World history is interesting. We asked the question, how do you kill 11 million people? Ian just gave me a stat that's a little bit staggering, that some recent research has shown that number is as high as maybe as 15 to 20 million people that were victims of the Holocaust, which even makes it even more staggering. When you use 11 million and then you put people behind it, that's almost inconceivable. And we talked about what we understand of the past and how that actually took place, what Hitler said, why people bought it. And we made some observations about how that brings us into modern day. The answer to the question was, how do you kill 11 million people? You lie to them. It was very much on purpose. It was driven. It was a group of people that were not only lied to, but they willingly went along with it. We told you about the history of not just the Germans, but other people that were included in that. We told you about how a church particularly reacted to it, and how when they heard the cries of the cars going by, they just sang louder. But as we were wrapping up last week, we shared with you a couple of ideas. That truth matters. And I think it's okay, as we enter this voting season in American culture, that speaking the truth should be something that we require of our elected leaders. It's okay to do. And if not, the question for you is a little bit more penetrating. If you don't care about that, then what is your standard for being led? I want to be led by people who tell the truth. And if that doesn't matter, then what is your standard for being led? Personality? Noise? You fill in the gap. But truth matters. You expect me to tell you the truth each week, not my truth, but God's truth. You want me to do that. And I'm always real careful. If I tell you it's my opinion, it's not biblical truth. It might be, but I'm not sure. I'm the first to disclaim myself. Because again, I think there's a responsibility for how you handle the truth. And I said the most dangerous thing is not a single politician with ill intent, but the most dangerous thing is a nation that has a citizenry, a bunch of citizens, capable of trusting a liar to lead them. Because ultimately, that's what happened, again, in the past in Nazi Germany. And history has shown time and time again, and the past has proved time and time again, that a nation of fools is certainly doomed. And we talked about the fact that we are living in an era where, there are 545 human beings that represent 328 million of us. And so what do we do about that? We talked about the importance of voting. We talked about the fact that lying to get elected should not be acceptable. If you lie to the government, it's a felony. If a politician lies to you, it's just politics. And we tend to judge the bad guys by their actions and the good guys by their intentions. So then the question becomes, how do you tell the good guys from the bad guys? And isn't that a little bit more subjective? And so what do we do? How do we deal with it? And what happens next? Then we talked about our foundations last week. We talked about some things that take us back to our Judeo-Christian foundations. And I gave you some quotes and some things from the Founding Fathers that certainly do have application as we tie back into kind of what our big discussion. And then we ended last week with this idea that's on the board right now. Something to remember as you go into the voting booth. And it's simply this. A vote is not a Valentine. We think of it that way sometimes. I mean, we are in a crazy political season right now, 2020. I think we're, what, 2-3 weeks away from the election, coming up first week of November. There are a number of candidates that are out there, 3 primarily that are running, 2 that are getting all the press. And we are divided along some lines. Basically, we have people that will openly say, I'm not voting for this person because I hate this. I'm voting for this person because I hate this person. Or I can't vote for this person because I hate this person. Or you're facing, once again, that choice where you say, I'm choosing the less of so many evils. And that's how you feel as you walk in the voting booth. And so think of your vote this way. It's not a Valentine. Okay? That's very freeing, right? It's not a Valentine. You are not proclaiming or confessing your love for a candidate. Think of your vote as a chess move. It is a vote that you are throwing that is a move on a chessboard that takes you a step further into the world that you believe you want to live in, that you believe that Jesus wants you to live in. And then you can stretch that further. You want your children or your grandchildren one day to live in. In other words, today's candidate, they have a shelf life. In a presidential election, it's 4 or 8 years. And there'll be another. And you've seen, and I mean, America has an amazing ability, and you've seen it through the years if you've been around long enough. There's a swing that tends to go back and forth and back and forth. And America has built within an opportunity, or at least a system that seems to have, thus far, to have kind of righted itself and self-correct along the way. I can think back over the course of my lifetime. I have seen Democrat and I have seen Republican presidents. Some I liked, some I didn't. Some votes I came up a winner on, some votes I did not win, as I cast my vote. But my vote has never been a Valentine. It is a chess move. And so when you go into that voting booth, the question you're asking yourself then is, Jesus, which of these people help me function and be a person of faith in the world that I want to live in, that you've planted me in, that I'm called to make a difference in? It has nothing to do with signs on the street. It has nothing to do with paid political ads, and it has nothing to do with anything. That's Jesus saying, I'm Jesus and I approve this message. In other words, how can you be the best version of you, and which candidate helps you be that best you can figure out? Here's what I also want you to know. Jesus knows who wins the next election already. And I also want to tell you that Jesus is not stressing out over the election results whenever they're done. Depending on who you listen to. Yeah, I mean, who knows? We may get to Inauguration Day and not know who won. But Jesus isn't stressed about that as much as people are. And I think it's cool. I think it's really cool that some people have very strong political beliefs and they really want to fight for those, and they feel that that's their sweet spot. I think that's awesome. Especially if it's grounded not in a party platform, but in their walk with Christ. And if your walk with Christ puts you in a party platform, then welcome to the party. If you have to buy a party platform that contradicts your walk with Christ, then I would say to you that you're in spiritual peril. And we'll eventually start talking about some issues here, and I'll give you some things to think about. But it also dawned on me, because for 2 weeks I just depressed the snockers out of you, and I know I did. I know I did because of the emails I got. I know I did because of the questions I got. I know I did because of just that wanting to talk about it more. And so I'm going to answer some of the questions I've gotten but also give you a chance to ask anyone. And again, here's the deal. I am not a junior historian up here. I just told you the story of the past. I'm trying to make a point here. I'm not telling you who to vote for when we get to the end of this series, by the way. Because while I care who you vote for, I don't care who you vote for, as long as you vote in a way that you believe honors Christ and you can defend that. And not that I'm going to ask you to defend it, but I think you ought to be able to. I mean, no one's going to get in your face on the way out the door. But I think you ought to be able to. I think you ought to be able to articulate it. So what I'm saying to you is what part of my political agenda is. Bring your voting under the lordship of Christ. And I can respect that. And I think you can too. And I think we ought to be able to rise above as followers, above the political clutter that we hear so often, and the venom and vitriol that is just spewed back and forth so often now, which has nothing to do with anything. I mean, and if you've been watching TV, if you're a political junkie this week, I mean, we are now looking at a Supreme Court justice who basically has been accused of, I heard one commentator say it this way, and I laughed out loud, and I thought, I bet you don't say it the second time they have you on TV, and sure enough, they pulled him off. Because he phrased it this way. He said, I'm listening to one party, and they keep putting up pictures that make the new nominee for the Supreme Court look like Ebenezer Scrooge, and they put pictures up of Tiny Tim saying that she's going to kill him. And that's just not right, because of a decision that she hasn't made yet. But in some ways, that was kind of the game plan this week. I don't know if you read talking points like I do, but that was part of the talking point. That was part of the strategy by one party this week. Now, is it godly? No. Is it fair? No. Is it politics? Oh, yeah. Are they telling the truth? No. Again, we get back to truth. Truth matters, right? And so you get into that and start watching that. But again, it's a fascinating journey to watch these things unfold. I mean, so to me, it really is. It's like watching ESPN. When there were no sports, that's all that was on, by the way. Now there's some sports again, it helps a little bit, but, but again, ESPN still didn't have that much to talk about. But there was a thought. I got the question, do you think then America is tracking the way of Nazi Germany? And that's not what I said. That was just a good illustration. Remember, I rattled off a lot of other countries that we could have picked out as ways to look at. But I do think the danger, though, that we talked about is very, very real. Because if you remember, the way that Nazi Germany worked was we looked at their history, and they gave up freedoms under the guise of, we trust these people, they'll keep us safe. And we've been through an era of history where all of a sudden, that ought to get your attention a little bit. And we're still living that. So go back to what we started the whole series with then. If you know the truth, and the truth sets you free. If you don't know the truth, you stay in bondage. So we want to make sure that we make our decisions based on who's telling us the truth, or what truth are we building our lives on and making decisions. Because again, that's what the problem in Germany was. 90% of the population, 90% went willingly along with what they believed to be truth because it's what someone told them to believe. So I'm not saying that we're doing that. I'm just simply saying that is always the danger. And I have a novel idea for you. We're followers of Christ. We're supposed to make a dent in the universe. Who stands in the gap to basically say, we want to hold you accountable. You will tell us the truth. We expect the truth. If we as followers don't do it, who does? Right? I mean, if the truth doesn't matter to us, who the heck's it going to matter to, right? And so that's kind of the idea behind the series. So no, I wasn't saying that we're going the route of Nazi Germany. That wasn't the thought at all. That was just a great illustration. And by the way, it resonated with you. It got you thinking, okay? So good. And the answer to the question still is true. How do you kill 11 million people? You lie to them. That is still the answer. You lie to them. That's what happened. That's history, and that is the past. That's where they collide, and that's true. But stopping there, any questions that you are just burning to ask, or you just want to air out, or something you just go, we're just so wrong, because you know what? It's okay. You can tell me that if you want to. And when I say I got questions, I got questions that were asked, and I'll try to answer a couple of them. But I want to give you a chance if you want to ask anything before we journey too much further down the road here. Because while I depressed you, I'm sure that I'll manage to tick some of you off before it's over with. But it's just us on Wednesday night, so it's okay. So, you know. Thoughts or questions?
I have a thought. I ran across something. So if you go to a southwest desert and catch 100 red fire ants, as well as 100 large black ants, and put them in a jar, at first nothing will happen. Some of you might have heard this or read this. However, if you violently shake the jar and dump them back on the ground, the ants will fight until they eventually kill each other. The thing is, the red ants think the black ants are the enemy and vice versa, when in reality, the real enemy is the person who shook the jar. So, the question is, who's shaking the jar?
There you go, yeah. I knew you'd get there. Who's shaking the jar?
Good one, yes.
I have a question.
That's a good question. Wait. Do I have an answer to that? I don't, but I think I said though. I think I said though. It does always tend to be though. There's always a little bit of power and money and what's in it for me. And somewhere out there, there's a question out there, right? So, yeah, who shook the jar?
Yeah.
So it's not you.
No, I'm not shaking the jar. No, I did see that, by the way. That's good.
Well, I was hoping other people have questions because, like, you say sometimes you can tell how smart somebody is by their question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is a good question.
Just say it's Matt's question.
Okay. Well, no, as you're speaking, I'm just wondering, so how do we require that of our leaders? Like, how, it's truth, and how do we hold them accountable? That's just what I'm thinking. It's like, because it is just so hard, like if you look at a debate. I mean, I know we're probably speaking of not just our president, but other leaders as well, but taking that as an example, and they're both calling each other how do you get down to that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things. I mean, as we kind of tell you where we're going, I'm gonna throw some big issues out, and then give you kind of an umbrella to put them under. Not telling you what to believe, but just things to think about. Okay, so we'll get there, and I think that's part of it. I think putting some very spiritual thought to what people are saying and what they believe. I think that's really important. I also think, though, we have a responsibility to do our homework, and we have a responsibility to be a little bit invested. I mean, I know some people, and again, they get really ticked at me, but they say, I'm not going to vote because it doesn't matter. Because politics, all they do is fight. But as I've told you, a vote matters. I mean, it is, I believe, for me, I think it's part of my responsibility as a follower. I think that Jesus was clear about, the way that you support governments, and so I mean, I think that that's important as well. So I mean, I think we have to do some research about that. And I think the other thing about it is too, though. I mean, I think it's okay to reach out and make noise and talk to these folks. I mean, again, not that they're going to listen, but I mean, how often do we hear or do we see that the politicians of the day that we see on TV, they're living in some kind of bubble that has nothing to do with our life, right? I mean, I think Leanne gave the illustration when she was sharing prayer requests. I mean, there's a state that they can't travel to because if you come from Florida, you got to quarantine right now. Well, that's a different world in Vermont than we're living in Florida right now. Which is another piece of it, though. I mean, I really do think one of the exciting things about our system is, though, the local level, being involved in the local level, because that's where a lot of things get done. That's where responsibility is. We have a former mayor sitting in the room tonight. We have somebody here in the church that's running for office. I mean, that's awesome. And I think it's okay to ask them questions. I think it's okay to support them, or if you disagree with them, to tell them in love, of course. But really to talk about, the way that things work and the way things operate. I think our involvement matters, and I think what's happened is that we've just kind of taken a step back. We've decided that we can't make a difference. It doesn't matter, because this will tick some people off. But America is nothing but a church start. Okay? I mean, this nation was started because people wanted to start a church. I mean, they wanted religious freedom. That's why they came. So the American adventure is a church start. And if you go back, and I mean, I got news for you. I mean, our founders, you know, as flawed as they were, and they were, man, it was like the Mickey Mouse Club. But what they did, you think about this. 200 years ago, that document, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, has had very few changes over 200 years. And they built that on religious principles, ideals. And you know what? By building on truth, whether they realized it or not, I really do believe that the founding of America was God-inspired, because God has a plan for this nation. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So I think these guys, whether they recognize it or not, the Holy Spirit was really driving them to do what they did. And although our cancel culture wants to remove all of that, right? But you know what? I think it's there. And so I think we people, as followers, need to step back into that process. But again, is somebody lying to you? Sure. Of course they are. Of course they are. Of course they are. So here's what you do. Who's lying to me less, and then what is my best move on the chessboard?
That's where that comes into play.
And that's where it comes into play. Because again, yes, it's strategic. There's a strategic move that you're making with a vote and a politician. And you know what I mean. You know, and if they'll come through for you, vote them out. I mean, you know, you just, you know, because it's tough. Because right, we get back to what can we do? We're just one person.
Yeah.
But I also think maybe, because like I felt moved in my heart to actually reach out to a politician that I thought was doing a good job, who I feel has been honest and open and researched. And so I took the time to figure out, how do I contact him and tell him? So I think even encouraging those that you do see that are doing it, and not so maybe worried about, hey, you lied to me, I'm going to make you accountable to me, but really just encouraging those that you feel do have integrity and you're not lying all the time. I'm like, not that they're 100%, you know, because they're going to try to make promises and keep them, and maybe they always can't, but if you see that in them, to just take the time to write them and say, I see this in you and I appreciate it, and keep it up, and I'm praying for you. I think that can make a huge difference too. But if we all started doing it, that might change how they politic as well. Because the critics are so loud.
Yes.
That, you know, why only give them a voice?
Well, John, how important is it that a politician will hear from citizens?
Well, it's really important, and for the politician to follow up on it. But I also would like to say this. My experience is half the people are mad at you all the time, no matter what the issue is.
Sure, of course they are.
It goes both ways.
Yeah.
You just have to roll with it.
Yeah. And represent them.
Yeah.
Even when they're mad at you. Right? Yeah. It is. It's a lot like having kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A large group of kids. So it's like,
Sure.
Go ahead. You know, you talk about, you know, the founding of the country and everything, and you know, the country was set up to create a system that people could pursue God as a choice, not as a mandate in the way they wanted to. And it seems like now that people are trying to use the system to pursue other things.
yes.
And I think for me, that's where I see the stress in the system was, I'm a solution architect, I'm a systems guy. You're trying to do something with a system it really wasn't designed to do. So you have two choices. You either have to go back and do what the system was designed to do, or you're going to need another system. And you know, I'm not sitting here saying we're at the crossroads of the end of the country, right? But I just say that is the you know, that's the organizational stress that we're kind of watching it go through.
Yeah.
And you know, trying to redefine what is right, what is true in a system that was based on truth isn't going to work. And you know, you either need another system or you have to use it where it's designed for. And that makes a lot of people very unhappy.
Sure. But again, you're back to doing this again, though, right? So as you navigate it, you're making a strategic chess move. You know, how do I vote for people that I believe will keep the system operating on the foundations? Now we're back to my political agenda, right? I mean, we want to hold on to our core beliefs, right?
Aren't there a lot more variables involved than just that? Like, I mean, dealing with people, it's like who's shaking the jar and like when they're shaking it and how are they shaking it?
If you're a red ant, you think there's a red ant shaking the jar, and if you're a black ant, you think there's a black ant shaking the jar. The both of you agree upon that the jar is being shaken, but
Yeah.
I want to make a comment about being an elected person. Before I was elected, I went to the city commission meeting, sitting out in the audience, and I kept saying, why is it taking them so long to make the right decision, or any decision? But once you're elected and you're sitting up there, it's a different game altogether.
Sure it is.
It's completely different. And I talked to Matt about that. I said, look, because I know Matt's been in the audience a lot, but I said, Matt, it's going to be different when you're sitting up there voting to do this or that. And it's not as easy as it looks.
It's an incredible responsibility if you think about it. I mean, because basically we've elected nationwide or nationally, there's 535 leaders that have to represent millions of people. Well, if you think about that, I mean, if you think about that, you would never want that job. Sort of a call of God, right? I mean, seriously, you think about just the responsibility that it is. And so you want to hope that the people that are trying to get those jobs are doing it for the right reasons and the best reasons. And now we get back to, you know, well, what do they believe? What do we want to know? However, don't kid yourself though. This is tricky stuff because I mean, I can tell you this now because I'm not there anymore, but there is a Christian voting coalition group here in Central Florida that put me on their hit list a few years ago. Because I wouldn't give out any of their information in church. Because you know I don't do that, right? We don't give out information in church. I don't think political information. Good point. Political information. Political information. Their voting guides especially, because what happened was their voting guides were not truthful. And so when I asked them, I said, "Well, you're a Christian organization, but you've got some stuff on here that's wrong. You're not telling the truth." And as a result, after I told them they couldn't come, they showed up on a Sunday morning while we did worship and put stuff under everybody's windshield wipers. And so when I asked them, well, why did you do that? Because it's the right thing to do. I said, you've lost your mind. And so I began my own little one-man, war against this particular group, and as a result, I was on their hit list for a while, which is great. And so we don't get their stuff anymore, which is super, which we didn't need it anyway, and it doesn't come up to the windshield anymore.
I mean, for me, it all comes back to biblical. It's all biblical, sure. And it's spiritual warfare. I mean, I believe in spiritual warfare, and that's what.
Yes, is there a spiritual dynamic and vibe to what goes on? Yes, there it is. Sure it is. Sure it is. Now we get back to the beginning. Were the founders inspired by God to do something? Because obviously these documents they created are pretty incredible. I mean, even if you have been listening on TV this week, when they start talking about the Constitution, you go, oh my gosh, how brilliant were these guys? Well, the reality is they weren't. They weren't. But, God really does step in and make up a big difference, right? I mean, you do things with him you couldn't do without him. And so, Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Isn't one of the challenges we have though is when you try to tie truth and trust, because one of the toughest things I think for us is to truly know what the Constitution says, because we get politicians who make their own interpretation of the Constitution and try to tell us this is what it says. So how do you get that straight?
I don't. I guess we just have to know what the Constitution says and pay attention, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but she was asking, how do you know the truth? We gotta, you gotta know the Constitution. There was an issue going on. I know the Constitution is something that everybody's going to take and read like they do a book, but that's one of the challenges is to know what the Constitution says.
Well, I'm thinking too, like how do you hold them accountable? I think it's like you
Yeah.
said, like being involved. And
Yeah.
what does that look like?
Oh, it's messy. I mean, you show up to vote, and
Right.
voting is a low bar,
Right.
right? But I mean,
Well, I'm talking about
Sure.
it's going to require more, right? So,
it can.
and that's,
But it's really kind of rough though to sit back and you listen at all these things. But as a child growing up, you were in school. If you were here, like I was here in school, and your teachers put these in front of you. And at that time, prayer was every morning. You said the Pledge of Allegiance and you said a prayer that morning in class. That was everyone. The only person, or should I say only two people that I noticed was when I hit, what, 5th grade? We had 2 kids that were, their parents were Jehovah's Witness, and they would not allow them to do that. The teacher said, okay, if you don't want to, that's fine. They stepped outside the door. But to understand that and to see what is happening now, those things were taught to you to let you know how hard it was for your parents, grandparents, and anybody else, and the leaders who fought for this country, for you to have these freedoms. And for someone to come back and try to change all of that without even living through some of those days, it's really kind of difficult to sit there and, to sit there and swallow this, because you have no clue. None. So to look at your children, grandchildren, and even if you're lucky to have your grandparents still alive, I know for them it's really disheartening right now, because like you said, it's a struggle. It's a faith struggle. It's a spiritual struggle. And for them, it's a mind and body all over because they fought so hard.
When we did this, we put as a Democrat, Independent, Republican, because we live in a world that wants to make it us versus them, right? And your us is whoever you are, right? And them is those guys. But it's really more of a we thing, right? I mean, we're Americans, and so at the end of the day, as American citizens, we want to get this right. As Christian American citizens, we really want to get this right, and I think we want to make it good. And again, but it does come back down to truth really does matter. What happens, though, is very often we seem to live in a day and age where the pattern is we perceive that people will say anything to get elected, especially at a national level. And we have to decide, is that okay? Because I promise you, if you ask any individual, well, I did that for their own good. I did that so I could do this to accomplish this. And now we're back to intentions. You have good intentions. But what is the principle? Because the principle works in politics too. Direction, not intention, gets you to your destination. It's a spiritual principle. Direction, not intention, gets you to your destination. Somebody wrote to me, and we're going to be down in here in a minute. They said, the quote I said was, "A nation of fools is surely doomed." And they said, do you think the German population that allowed Hitler to lead them was a nation of fools? And not necessarily. Remember the story I told you, though. What happened is that Germany was able to convince the local leaders, who the people trusted, that this was the best thing. And so, as a result, they trusted the leaders that they knew. They felt like they knew, but they had been deceived. They were sincere in their beliefs of thinking they were doing the right thing. They were just sincerely wrong. Which also lets you know then, too, that part of this is not just to be sincere. If you watch somebody on TV or you hear a candidate, they're just so sincere. Yeah, but they can be sincerely wrong. I mean, I have some really nice people that I just disagree with. Now, the cool thing is we ought to be nice, and we need to be kind, and that is the low bar of existence. And so that should happen, and that also should happen, by the way, in politics. We should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. And for Christians, we should be able to show mercy and forgiveness and grace, even in situations when we disagree with another. And so there is an element that faith kind of gets lost in the body politic, and we choose sides. We become red, we become blue, we become independent, we become purple. You know, whatever we become, we choose those things, and we try to park our faith behind those things. And my suggestion is put your faith in front of those things. And do that. And so next week, what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to pick and choose what are the issues of the day. Let's put it that way. Issues of the day. And we're going to try to put a filter on them to say, okay, for this issue of the day, what are things as a follower that I should value? And then how does politicians line up behind that so I can make the best chess move to be a good follower? And we're going to look at the full gambit of stuff. Depending on what time we get started, we'll cover a whole lot of territory. And we'll get there and we'll land at week 4, and then you vote the next week. How about that? No, you vote a few weeks from there. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you are a God who is good to us and you care about every area of our life, yes, even our politics. And Lord, we just want to be followers. We want to be the best followers we can be. And so teach us this day, remind us this day that our faith doesn't stop at the edge of a voting booth line, or it doesn't stop when we classify ourselves as Republican, Democrat, or Independent. But instead, our faith permeates everything about us and should change everything about us. And so no matter who we are, no matter where we go, remember that we are to make a difference in the universe, and we are to be people who make a change. Teach us that, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.